LLMs. They are everywhere, but not all are created equally. How do you know which one to trust? Which one will do your job? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kirk, and today we're going to talk about how to evaluate LLMs. Now, before we jump right in, which we will do using Azure AI Foundry, we need to cover the basics. There's a little bit to cover here, but I'll try to make this as painless as possible. So let's jump right in. First, let's answer the question, why evaluation matters. Well, you picked an LLM. Is that LLM up to the task? How does it compare to other models? And second, because you don't know how certain models have been trained, you risk exposing unreliable bias or hallucinated content to end users. You remember our LLM flow. Put in a query and get a response. Now, we could use a human evaluator to evaluate all those responses, but that would be pretty time-consuming and pretty tedious. Enter LLM as a judge. Yes, we will use an LLM to judge another LLM, which will output evaluation metrics. How does our evaluation work? First, we need a dataset that will have an input and a label. We call this dataset a golden dataset. It is a carefully curated set of data that serves as a single source of truth for testing, validating, or benchmarking a model. Our labels are called grounded truths. Grounded truths are the actual verified facts we will use to evaluate LLM responses. Next, we take our inputs from the golden dataset and feed them into the LLM to evaluate. This, of course, will generate a response. We then create an evaluation prompt which combines our generated responses with our golden dataset to output metrics. But don't worry, this looks complicated, but this part will be done for us by using Azure AI Foundry. And finally, let's talk about evaluation metrics. This won't be an exhaustive list, but let's cover a few. First, semantic similarity. How close in meaning two things are. Example, car and automobile are both similar, but car and banana are not. Next, relevance. How much something actually answers or relates to what you're asking about. AKA, if you ask, what is the capital of France? You hope to get back the answer Paris, and not, France has good food. And next, coherence. How well the words or sentences flow together and make sense as a whole. AKA, Paris is the capital of France is coherent, while Paris, the capital, bananas fly airplanes, is not. Precision. Of all the items the model predicted as positive, how many were actually positive? So high precision means fewer false positives. And recall. Of all the actual positive items, how many did the model positively identify? High recall equals few false positives. Then we have the F1 score. The F1 score is a pretty important metric, especially for classification models. And it balances both precision and recall. And it'll be a number between 0 and 1. The F1 score took me a little bit of time to wrap my head around, but hopefully this clears it up a little bit. Okay, we are back in Azure AI Foundry. And as I said, we are going to start evaluating models. And we are going to evaluate GPT-4o and GPT-4o mini. Now, before we do that, as you know, with evaluation, a lot of people, the first thing they do when they start thinking about models to use, they go and look at benchmarks. And as I mentioned, the MMLU, Massive Multitask Language Understanding, that's the benchmark most people quote. So you'll probably go in here and you'll look for GPT-4, and you'll see how it compares to, or there's GPT-5, but we're just going to use 4, how it compares to other models in terms of the results. And if you go to the card itself on GPT-4 and on GPT-4o mini on OpenAI, you can see the MMLU benchmarks. And for what I'm going to demo today, we are going to demo a science data set to see how it performs. And you can see here we have different benchmarks on the card itself. So this is a good starting point, but of course, you're going to want to test against your own data set, what we call the golden data set. Golden data set is something that the domain expert will give you, and that's what you want to test and evaluate the models against. And I'll go into that a bit more when we start stepping through the evaluation. Okay, we are back in Azure AI Foundry. I already have my project here created. Before we go to evaluation, let's go to our models. I've already deployed GPT-4o and 4o mini. So what I'm going to do is we're going to evaluate 4o mini against our data set. And actually, I'm also going to deploy the OS3. Let's look for this for 1 second. The O3 mini LLM. As I explained, we're going to use LLMs to evaluate other LLMs. So LLM-as-a-judge. This is kind of like, remember the movie Inception where you keep on going down certain layers? That's kind of what it reminds me of. I guess that's a metaphor for the times we're living in. But what we're doing is we're using an LLM as a judge to evaluate an LLM. And the reason I pick an O3 mini is because this model is smaller and it's good for reasoning. So it's a reasoning and problem solving model specific for that. So it's good for what we're going to do is a semantic similarity evaluation. It'll make more sense when we get to that step, but let's confirm. And I'm just going to deploy this one. And now we can go to our evaluations and create a new evaluation. And we're going to evaluate a model. Here, this is a data set. So this is good for if you want to test a data set you already created from an LLM or perhaps from your agent. I'll also mention that once you actually start deploying these and create a CI/CD pipeline, you also want to build an evaluation into the pipeline, but that's for another lesson. So let's just go here, pick the model. As I said, we're going to use a data set. I already created a data set, as I mentioned. This will probably be given to you by a domain expert. Just give me a second to load this up. So I have a set of question and answers. Let me just format this nicer. I have the JSON extension here, a JSON formatter, and then JSON-L. You just need to do a little bit of scripting to make it format nice. But okay, so think about this. This is the data set we're going to test against. This is going to be our golden data set. And golden means a high quality, trusted reference data set. So as I said, the domain expert is going to give you this because these are the things you want to evaluate against the LLM to make sure if you give it a question, this is the answer that you expect. So for your domain, maybe you're going to fine tune a model, or maybe this is not giving the answer that you want, then that's when you might want to start fine tuning or using a different model. But this is what you want to test against, and that's what we're going to do. Some basic science questions. There are also other, I should also mention, there's other data sets out there in the world for science. Like for instance, if you go to Hugging Face, here's another page. This is the SciQ data set, which actually is a benchmark itself. And the benchmark has used this data set to evaluate models. But of course, for whatever you're doing, even if, for instance, if this is chatbot, you want to make sure the questions and answers you get. So for instance, how vaccines work. You don't want to get anything that's misleading, is what I'll say. Vaccines, a touchy subject. And because of the science, you want these to be very accurate answers. So that's what we're going to evaluate against. Okay, so I'm back here, and I've already loaded this data set into Azure AI. So there it is, same as this. And another thing is, you can actually create a data set if you wanted to with an LLM. So this is what I mean by inception. We could create a data set with an LLM and use an LLM to evaluate that data set against another LLM. That's the inception part. Probably hard to wrap your head around, but let's ignore that part. We're just using an LLM as a judge to evaluate an LLM with our data set. So let's pick that. We need a system prompt. I already have one created here because this is going to be our LLM. I'm going to test against GPT-4o Mini. And I have a system prompt that we're giving the LLM to test against. So this is also where you're going to test against the prompt itself to see what it creates. So you are a knowledgeable science assistant. Provide accurate, detailed, and well-structured answers to scientific questions. And these are going to be the questions. You can read that. So in our query field, we're going to read this question from our data set. And then this expected response, this golden data set, the expected response is going to be our grounded truth. An important term when you're evaluating models, grounded truth. So go there, and we're going to do our first test. And as I said, let's do semantic similarity. As it says it recommends O3 Mini for best results, and it's also cheaper. So let's pick the O3 Mini. That's what we're grading the LLM against. Semantic similarity. And remember, this is just an LLM with a prompt. So if you want to go in here, you can read this prompt, but basically we're telling the LLM how to evaluate the other LLM, the outputs. So we're saying if it's highly similar, 5, 4, 3, and then we're feeding in the data. So the grounded truth, as I said, is going to be in our data set, and it's going to be that expected response. So we're using the LLM, we're going to get output and compare it to the expected response. And we have a range of 1 to 5 that we're going to evaluate against. So let's add that. And for now, let's just do this. We're just going to evaluate semantic similarity. And let's click next. We're using the GPT-4o Mini. Semantic similarity GPT-4o Mini. And that's it. Now we can submit it and wait for our response. Okay, this has done. As you can see, we have 20 out of 20 passed. I kind of went over quickly what semantic similarity is, but basically it's just comparing your grounded truth to your response. So here, your expected result, make sure these are similar semantically. That's all that one's doing. So let's go ahead and do another one. Let's do another one. Do the same thing, evaluate a model, use the same data set, the same prompt. Another thing is, these are all tokens, right? Testing, you're being charged for tokens. The LLM-as-a-judge, you're being charged for tokens. So you have to consider that. You have to think about your prompts, what you're sending in, what you're getting back, the length. You're being charged for all this. Just something to consider. So here's your query, the question. We've already done that part. So we have different things we can test against here. You can test against some of the safety. I'm not going to do that, but that is, actually maybe I will. But let's do relevance right now. And using GPT-4o to test Mini. Again, we have a prompt here just to see how relevant our answer is. Make sure you're not getting irrelevant responses. Here, where we're just giving it the question to test against. So that's basically all it is. We don't have any grounded truth here. We're just testing to see if this is a relevant response. So let's just add that one. And let's go into F1. F1, as you know, is an important score. This is really touchy on your grounded truths, as you'll see, because F1 basically It's evaluating, well, it says it right here, semantic closeness. It uses precision and recall. This is against the grounded truth. So it's really comparing the tokens in the generated response against the tokens that are going to be in the grounded truth. So grounded truth expected response again. So let's do that one. And let's do another one. Make sure there's nothing violent in the content. It's pretty simple, but again, you want to make sure that the LLM doesn't produce anything misleading or harmful. So let's go ahead and do that. I want to show you this because the F1 score, as I said, this relies a lot on your grounded data, and this is when you need to talk to domain experts. So I'm going to submit this one. It gives you the name. Who cares? Let's just leave that there. I'm going to delete this anyways, but you might want to name this something more accurate so you know what this evaluation is. So let's submit that, and let's just wait. Okay, that finished. And as you see, got 20 out of 20 passed. I took like maybe around a couple of minutes to run. And again, we only have 20 questions here in our golden data set. So you imagine you're probably going to be testing against a larger data set, so it might take a little bit longer. But let's look at the data here, and I want to show you something here. It says everything passed, but all the F1 scores here failed. And as I said, F1 score, you see our generated response is a lot longer than our expected response. And F1 is good for classification tasks. When something's really wordy and chatty, not a good metric to use. So I probably shouldn't have picked that one here. But I just want to show you basically the steps. Or if we wanted to limit the size to have something really small and compare it against the expected response, like maybe a very simple 20 words answer against a 20-word response, and this might have been a better F1 score, a better metric to use. But what I wanted to do was just give you that. Okay, since I said that a good way to evaluate F1 is maybe to limit the length of the output, let's just go ahead and do that. And let's do the same thing, just because I don't want to leave you thinking, hey, what's this guy doing, giving us a bunch of failures in F1? Does he even know what he's talking about? So this is what I mean. So the system prompt, I'm going to say limit your response to no more than 50 words. Let's try that. And I'm actually going to leave this. I think I left the other one too, as GPT-4o. But basically we're just using, I'm just not going to use Mini. I'm just going to use GPT-4o. Mostly because I can pass in the length of the output to GPT-4o. But I just want to show you that you can actually use the same model to evaluate the model. Let's go ahead and do that. As I said, same thing. F1 score, same grounded response. Do that and run this and come right back. Okay, and we are back and it ran. And you can see we have 16 out of 20 passed. A bit better, but this is what I mean. I don't want to export it, but of course, yes, you can export it. Data. As I said, we limited our responses to 50 characters. So comparing the expected to the generated, the grounded truth. That one looked good. This one, not so much. Not sure why, but this is what I mean. Talk to domain experts. And when you're evaluating, you're not just doing F1 score. We already did semantic, similarity, and all those passed. So you're probably going to do more than just one metric to evaluate against. But just wanted to show you that. So this is where you want to look through your responses. We can even evaluate parts of the path. This one's quite different, and this is a touchy subject. So these are the steps you want to do and work with your domain experts. But I just want to give you the tools to think about this and go forward and work with your domain experts, become an AI engineer, know what you're talking about, and just go out there and do a good job. All right, that's it for today on today's topic of evaluating LLMs. I hope you got something out of this. I know that was a lot. It's a little bit confusing. LLM as a judge, LLM, evaluating an LLM. but I hope I made it clear. And if I did, please like and subscribe. Also, I'll be creating a lot more content you don't want to miss out. And until then, I will see you next time.